we've democratized the recording process so much that anybody can do it, in quotes. You have to assume that if earlier artists had the technology that those bands had just a few years later, they probably would have done the same thing. We are products of our time and what we have available to us.
Accentuate what we're thinking, but don't steal the spotlight, or don't like go into what you want it to be. This is still our album.
How many times have you, I know how many times I have, give or take, not that I keep track, but how many times is it that you get through a segment and you sing it and it's all perfect until the final like 3 syllables and you're like, ah!
And I said, do you ever feel like you're kind of making the same album over and over? Do you notice that you're kind of doing this? And they said, well, yeah, but if it's not broken, don't fix it. If you got to eat your favorite meal every night, would you complain? And I said, well, maybe after a while.
Right. That turns out that's like an aesthetic choice now, to actually sound like people playing.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up, too, because I think back to 2 albums, I think, that represent the dichotomy that you're talking about in terms of production, one of which made my top 20. Matter of fact, it might have been in my top 10. If it wasn't, it was in the next 10. And it was an album, A Great Wide Nothing, A Shout Into the Void. Okay. That, to me, what I enjoyed so much about that album, I think, was, on one hand, it had like, and I know they're not old enough. At least I feel certain they're not old enough, but there was this certain feel to it that brought me back to early 80s kind of new wave rock sound. And it was uncluttered. It was not fussy. There was a certain lo-fi kind of sound to it, but through this whole kind of prog approach that I found really cool. Like, nobody does that. Nobody sounds like that. But if you went back to 1983, you might hear bands sounding similar to that production-wise, like the Cars, or here in Philly, Robert Hazard, or the Hooters, or something like that in their very early days before Hollywood got a hold of the Hooters and kind of cleaned things up and polished it up for Nervous Night. That first album is a very different animal. And then I think of another one that I won't name because I don't want to dump on them. But it's like this new metal band out of Finland or Norway or something like that. And the production was so ridiculously pristine and like almost to the degree that it left me a little cold and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I know somebody in the comments to the video when I talked about it mentioned like, yeah, it almost like it could have been AI or something like that. I'm going, I didn't even think about that. And I thought, I wondered to what degree that might have been used in the midst of that. And yeah, here it is. It's like there's nothing wrong with the music. There's nothing that sounded terrible about the music, but something just was kind of tickling my brain the wrong way. And the other album that it seemed to be so much lower-fi in its approach was the one I loved.
Right.
It's almost like the audio version of the Uncanny Valley. It's like I can just tell there's something
exactly
a little strange. I remember years ago I was recording something that I was just making up, and I was getting frustrated because I kept hearing my fingers slide on the acoustic guitar. And then around the same time I was listening to Opeth's Still Life, which is maybe like some of their most intricate acoustic guitar work. Right. I was like, oh wait, you can hear their fingers sliding on the guitar. That's okay. And it's like, it's a human element. It's not like an imperfection. It just is something you won't get if you're relying on like an AI, unless they do it fake, and then it still sounds like fake.
Right. Yeah.
Is it possible to play the guitar with that way, especially if it's solo, without the sound of the fingers sliding on it? Can anybody play it that cleanly?
It's hard. It depends on what you're doing. I mean, some of it is technique, but there's a lot of factors. There's the strings you're using, there's the technique, there's the microphones, how high-fi are the microphones. The pristine capture of things. I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing too about older recordings. I was listening to this Sinatra record a couple days ago, and the way they got vocals to sound back then, is unbelievable to me. That was the age of like when engineering was a science, you know, in terms of they had limited microphones. You had to know exactly where to place them, because you're not capturing all of these isolated things that we're doing now. You're having to capture a singer and an orchestra and this like all in the same take, you know, and it's going down live. And it's like, well, how do you do that? You don't have like a million microphones. But the balance of some of those recordings and the presence of where the voice sits in the mix, it's like crystal clear and warm, and there's none of that sort of harshness. It's like we have access to all of these tools and all of these frequencies, it seems like, that they didn't have yet. It all seemed to come together in a really cohesive way that is almost like really hard to, you know, retroactively like sort of engineer that stuff. You almost have to try to do exactly what they did in order to do it. You can't, it's really hard to simulate, you know. But my point in saying that too is that those recordings tend to be a lot more forgiving in terms of noise. And sometimes I've heard multi-tracks of some classic songs, and you wouldn't believe like the noise on the track. Like there could be like a phone ringing in the background. You're like, what the hell is going on at this place? But you never hear it in the record. But like I could be recording down here in my basement, and then like somebody fires up a lawnmower, and I'm like, you know, I can't record for the next hour or whatever, because you think it's going to be in there somehow, or you use it to your advantage. But things being in and out of tune. I mean, there are a lot of things that are just, they're not in tune in classic records, but it's in tune with itself, if that makes sense. But you know, they might have tuned it to some piano that was in the studio that was not in perfect A440. So it's like, it's in this in-between zone, and you try to play to it, and you have to actually tune to the record. A lot of AC/DC records are like that, the early ones. Like you try to learn Highway to Hell. I mean, that's a little bit later, but like even earlier than that, and you're like, well, wait a minute, it's not an E and it's not an E flat. So you have to kind of figure out this in-between zone that they're tuned to. And
that's somewhere where the engineer's going, and the artist's going, I meant to do it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
That was an autistic choice.
Yeah. So.
It's interesting too. Sometimes, like modern bands will get criticized if they sound too much like older bands. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm also one to do that too. Because you get into the whole definition of like, is it progressive? It's prog, but is it progressive if it's not progressing? But I think of a band like Wobbler, who undoubtedly sound like Yes, but they really pull it off to the point where it's like nobody else is doing it like this. Even Yes doesn't sound like Yes anymore as much.
Right.
And I'm actually reviewing an album for the next issue of Prog by a band called Polychrome.
Okay.
Their second album. And I'm listening to it, and it sounds a little bit like classic, like Camel, mixed with like Zombies, Odyssey, and Oracle, and just like it's almost hard to pin down. Like this sounds like it could have been from that era.
Right.
And it's like, on one hand, it's original enough that I wouldn't say it's derivative, but it's so authentic to a time period that they managed to do that it kind of blows my mind. Like it doesn't sound like you're imitating. It sounds like you're like authentically paying homage to it or something.
I'll be interested in hearing that. Yeah, that's a hard thing to pull off, because a lot of times it trips my ear to the point where if it sounds like it's trying too hard, I'm just gonna pull out my Camel record, you know? Yeah. It's not to say that it isn't good at what it's doing, but like sometimes that it can cross over into that feeling of pastiche, you know, and then you can appreciate it for the craft of having pulled it off, but it's hard to connect to emotionally because you're just thinking about the reference points. I find that happens to me a lot with things like if it's playing it a little bit too close to the influences, it's hard for me to get over that. You know, if it primarily rests on that.
Yeah. I don't know, Randy, Randy, are you familiar with Beardfish?
Yeah, of course.
So Ricard and I have actually like discussed this a bit, or at least he's seen me say this, that on Destined Solitaire there's a song called Abigail's Question.
Okay.
And I've said, this is great. This is just Frank Zappa's Inca Roads. And like, if you listen to it, like it is, but it's so close, and they think they do their own thing with it. But it is, to me, that's like an example of something that kind of walks that line of like, this is really kind of close to something else, intentionally or not.
Yeah, well, yeah, Porcupine Tree did it with Time Flies. That was like, essentially, it was like Spot the Pink Floyd reference. Like you could kind of play a game of kind of adding up all of the different things, and it is very deliberate. But that's an example. It's a song. It's different if if a band's whole existence seems to be to ape a couple of different things. But yeah, that's interesting.
So I'm curious, Randy, because no, I don't think it's possible to be a musician and not have influences, not have other musicians that you admired that inspired you to play the instrument. Do producers have influences the same way or similar to it?
Oh, yeah, I think definitely. Yeah. So the Beatles have been brought up a bunch of times, of course. Who doesn't know who George Martin is because of that, because of his relation to that music. The guy that more people should talk about is Jeff Emmerich, because he engineered all that stuff. And he's the guy that was getting the sounds down. So when somebody had some crazy idea, I want my voice to sound like I'm underwater, he's let's try singing through this Leslie cabinet. Nobody's ever done that before, and lo and behold, now everybody does it. Like he's kind of the unsung hero in terms of the actual production, in terms of the sounds. So yeah, engineers, producers all have their influences, and that's something that when I was younger, I probably paid more attention to the musicians when I would look at liner notes. As time goes on, though, I'm just as curious to know who produced it, where it was recorded, all that kind of stuff, because once you start digging in those directions, you're trying to put together a sense of what somebody's sound is. As a producer, I find all that stuff fascinating. It's like, oh, they worked with this band in 1981. They went on to work with this band in 83. I can hear something very similar about the drum sound where, okay, same producer, is it the same engineer, is it the same studio, that kind of thing. Historically, it just helps you trace where things are coming from. I'm just a big fan of music history and the context of things. If I hear something that came out in 1980 that sounds like it's from 3 years later, I'm like, I can't believe they were doing this then. How? And who else heard it? Because clearly this set something in motion. These days, it's harder for me to know what I'm hearing, to be honest, because of all the things that we're talking about, because of the endless amount of sound manipulation that's possible. I think obviously the earlier you go back to records, what the limitations are to a large degree. You can spot when like the first Moog synthesizer arrived on the scene, and then within a couple of years, oh, okay, now I'm hearing this very particular sound all of a sudden. Not so much the case now, because I think that's it's not that the mystery's gone, but it's like we hear so many electronic sounds everywhere all the time that I don't know what's surprising to people anymore. I have tended to, as of late, want to start as much with what I would call an analog source as possible. So on a physical keyboard instrument, a piano, guitar, whatever it happens to be, then maybe process it later into something that's weirder or less recognizably that thing. But I find that if I start in the computer, for one, there's just way too many options. It's like it's hard to find a starting. It's that option fatigue phenomenon. But then I don't know, for some reason it doesn't feel as satisfying a lot of times as starting with something that's a little bit more pure and then bending that into some strange shape. That seems more unique to me, for what I'm trying to do anyway.
Yeah. If we take any message away from tonight, I guess it's mostly the idea that human is better when it comes to music.
Well, that's an interesting statement, because like lately I'm listening to like a lot of early 80s like electronic driven music.
Yeah.
But actually it turns out that the human element is still very much strong in that stuff. And what I love about a lot of it is it's the communication between the human element and the electronic trying to create something otherworldly, and I think people are obviously still doing that now, but there's something different about it in the computer age. It's I don't know. I can't quite articulate what that is. Yeah. And I'm a product of the computer age. I mean, I was born in '88, so I do. Technically, we are like this is kind of the last generation that remembers a pretty good chunk of a semi-analog world before everything sort of switched over to computers and online communication and everything. It was like I didn't have a computer in the house until I was in 7th grade, which was pretty late actually. So yeah, I've got old 4-track cassette tapes of ideas, and that's how I did things. So like I do come from that that I can relate to. Yeah. And I grew up around a lot of, classic music. So I still tend to, in a lot of ways, look backwards more than forwards in terms of new music. I find that I'm always discovering new things from the past that I didn't know. And that might inform what I'm doing more than what somebody's doing right now. And there's just so much music that I'll never get to. But I keep trying.
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
It's an interesting coincidence. I also got my first computer in 7th grade. It was 1983.
Incredible. Yeah.
So far back. Yes. Early adopter from the get-go. But
yeah,
it was fun. It could display 4 colors at once. Unless you wanted in the highest resolution, then it could do 2. Nice. That was it. But yeah, and when I say about human is better, I think mostly just the idea in terms of creation. I think music is one of those human elements that connects people and allows us to communicate in emotion rather than in words and necessarily just intellect. And right now I think of AI a little bit in Lord of the Rings nerd alert, brace yourselves, that it is like Morgoth, that could not create things, could only copy them, and usually in mocking. Not to say that AI is necessarily mocking us yet, but just the idea that it really is going to, whatever it churns out, it has borrowed somewhere else first and foremost, and is essentially kind of copying and just spitting out plagiarism.
Well, right. As it exists now, it's scraping all available data and putting together some Rubik's Cube version of what all of that is. Yeah. There are a couple things I don't like. One is a lot of people haven't given their consent to feed the machine. And I think that's really wrong, that it can just kind of take your likeness essentially and say, thank you. I know people in the TV film industry who are at this point where for some of these jobs, they basically want you to sign a waiver essentially saying like, you're going to teach this AI program what you do. And it's like, you're going to just plan your own obsolescence. That's not right. And there's been this video going around from the CEO of one of these AI music apps trying to make this point of how nobody really wants to make music anymore. It's super inconvenient and it's just it's a pain in the ass. So why even bother? Like that's the selling point. And it's like, well, you could say that about life. I mean, like, how far do you want to
nihilistic?
Yeah, how far do you want to take that? It's like, why can you not just put it forth and say, like, look, this is an interesting tool. It might help some people. Why throw the whole thing away and say, like, nobody wants to actually be creative. Nobody wants to actually express themselves anymore, and from your heart and mind. Just let us do it for you. It's like, what? Why do we need to take it to that level?
It's like a Black Mirror episode.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my! This is a guy that's the CEO of a music streaming service.
Yeah. This has been going around the past few days, but
oh man, I've not seen. Dude, get another job. You clearly are in the wrong particular field. You're at the wrong company. Like,
it sounds to me like somebody who just never, who maybe thought they wanted to make music and couldn't hack it. And it's like, so okay, what if you can't do it? Then I'm just going to come up with something that eliminates that for everybody. Like, why does that have to be the solution? Do it for you. That's cool, but why make it about like music as a whole being like this enterprise that nobody could possibly want to struggle through? I mean, is it hard? Yeah, of course it does. It's this idea that you shouldn't try to even be proficient at anything. Why work hard? Why do anything? Like, that's the opposite of pretty much everything you were ever told growing up, which is like, you got to work hard if you want it. This is like the exact opposite. It's like, how about you just don't work on it anymore at all? Because what's the point? I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Wow. It turns the whole process into like a cynical business, and it's in the complete opposite of the idea of like the poetic starving artist almost, or just that idea of like, I'm going to go play the coffee shops. I'm going to go like build this up. Yeah. I would rather have 10% of the fan base and 10% of the income.
Right.
But I'm 100% authentic to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm all about the work harder or work smarter, not harder kind of thing. There are a lot of aspects of how we can do things today that admittedly I haven't even embraced. That, you have to weigh the options. Is it worth like, booking the gig at the local coffee house and having to play to 10 people, or is it smarter for me to invest in like a really good camera and to get good at editing and putting things on the internet? Like, that's a valid argument. One of those things might in the end be more beneficial. But within that, there are multiple steps that you have to take in order to, get better at things. And it's like basically saying like, don't ever push yourself to be great or to be better. Just have the machine do it all and forget that you even wanted to write a song in the first place. Just
give up your ambition. Let the machine do it for you.
Yeah.
The temples of Syrinx will churn out the music you should listen to. That to me is someone who thinks, and that actually upsets me. That distresses me that someone could be the CEO of a music streaming service and not apparently give a rat's ass about music beyond the commodification of it. That the creativity, the art. I mean, to paraphrase Danny on Ted Lasso, music is life, man. Yeah. Music is life. Why would you? It makes me sad.
There's like AI artists now. I think like single like pop star types, but also bands that are AI, and they're like getting big streams on Spotify and Apple Music and
it's a very weird time. I think this year is probably the year that it starts to reach some kind of critical mass. We're also over halfway through this decade. I think about this kind of stuff a lot, especially with music. Like, when does a decade start to define itself musically? Often you hear it in production, to bring it back to the main topic. When people think of the 80s, what do they tend to think of? They tend to think of drum machines and big gated snare drum sounds and electronic sounds or big hair, whatever the thing is. But that usually isn't defined until like a few years into a decade. Like, that isn't 1980 necessarily, but by 1983 to 85, that starts to become pretty prominent. You mentioned being a Rush fan. There's a huge difference between, let's say, Signals, where they are still very much a three-piece guitar, bass, drum rock band, but incorporating keyboards to getting to power windows just 3 years later, where the synthesizers are essentially the sort of main, sort of primary instrument in which the other things are, that's what's being built around. It's like, oh, this is the thing now. Now we're going to all find our space within it. But by 1985, that was kind of the sound. At least that's where a lot of people were heading. 70s productions grow exponentially between like 1970 and then the end of the decade. There's been more multi-track capability introduced, more gadgets, just again, more manipulation of sound and so forth. So I say that to say that I don't know what defines this decade at all. I don't think that there is anything you could really point to, because music doesn't seem to have that thread through the mainstream anymore, because everything it's all been either siloed, or it's like we're all fractals in some algorithmic sort of maze, and if you want to take one path, your algorithm is showing you specifically everything that sounds like this. And then you start to think, well, that's how music sounds now. It's like, no, that's just that's how it sounds over here. But these people are over here and they have a completely different scene going on, but that's how all their records sound. There isn't like that one thread through the mainstream that everybody's listening to, really, that says like, that's the new sound that we're all going to go for. And I think previous decades had that, where they had markers. What we have now is more music than there's ever been, yet it's like oddly harder to find because there's so much to wade through. And you have this AI thing, which is about to, as it has already started, about to also flood the, all of the channels with whatever that happens to be. And people having to figure out, is this a real artist I'm listening to? Is this AI? And the bigger question, do I care? Because I think that's the thing that I think is more concerning than anything, which is if you get enough people to not care, you've essentially now you can do whatever you want. You can pump out as many AI artists as you want. You basically just turn it into fast food. And people say like, well, I like the song and I like that guy's voice. I don't care that it's not like a real person. I just like the way it sounds. What are you going to do then? I mean, there was some song that I think hit #1 on the country charts, which was AI, and everybody was like, "Oh, I didn't think that this was going to happen yet."
Yeah,
and it has. So now, what do you do? It kind of proves that things are somewhat. It's kind of a criticism, really, if you think about it, of what's being churned out. So
of the musical taste of the public.
In a way, I mean, the
Rick
best
Beato has entered the chat.
Yeah. I kind of wondered to myself if it's going to be a situation where you will essentially have like a sort of mass audience that just accepts it. And then the people who really want the real thing, it's going to, it's just going to be more of that sort of, do you shop at Whole Foods or do you shop at whatever kind of thing, I know we keep going to food analogies, but I think it's a good one, like the farm to table thing. It's like it's like people are going to want to know where the music's coming from, who's making it, how they're making it, and that could be a renaissance for artists who can kind of find that audience who cares about them. But it might not reach the kind of numbers that bands used to reach, because it just might get just that much more specific. I don't know.
I don't know, but you say that idea of people accepting of the AI, and all I hear is a Don Henley lyric a whole new breed of men with no souls. I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. But
It's so
you
true,
also,
Randy,
go ahead,
okay.
Jordan.
I was going to say, because I was born in December of '87, so I'm barely older than you. Like I don't know how many months, but I'm right there. I wonder if you've seen this too. It's kind of tangential, but like kind of streaming through like TikTok or YouTube Shorts. I've been seeing a lot of like 1 minute 1990s nostalgia clips of just like it's like sounds of children playing, and I think back to like the '90s had such a vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like musically, just clothing, like the '90s was such a thing, and I kind of agree. I mean, maybe it's me just getting older too, but like I don't know what the 2020s, in like 50 years, looking back on the 2020s, like what will really be distinctive, other than, to me, it's almost like going backwards in nostalgia. Like there's a lot of '80s nostalgia now, not only with like Stranger Things and Welcome to Derry, but a lot of like prog bands going back to like the '80s.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's repeating itself. But also, I think even beyond like the AI, something I always lament is just like, I'm a teacher too, and a lot of my students are about like 18. A lot of them just don't listen to music, period, or the whole idea of like an album as a singular thing is lost to them. They know the song. And whenever I introduce like one of my favorite bands ever, the Deer Hunter, who will like repeat themes across albums. I'll mention Devin Townsend, who repeats ideas across bands.
Right.
And they just like cannot comprehend of something like that. And it's like old man yelling at the cloud or something maybe, but it's just like you guys are missing out on like the whole idea of a sequence of songs meaning something as a collective.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's no way of explaining. Well, I'm sure there is a way to explain why, guys like us care about that kind of stuff. I know that I was raised in an environment where people did and like to get together and talk about music and listen to it, and debate about guitar players and like all that kind of super nerdy stuff, like sports, like people who can just rattle off endless stats about like the 1984 Mets or whatever. A lot of us music nerds are like that, and it depends on how deep you want to go and who your friends are. And, I'm fortunate to know a lot of music nerds, and I can have those conversations, and I can be out and say like, what about this record? Yeah, it's great. It's worth on. Okay. What about this? Okay. But it's that human connection that I'm not interested in getting that from an algorithm. I can't fault people who have grown up in that system, that if that's all they know. But I think what you're saying is like, you're actually, as an educator, you're trying to tell people, hey, there's this other way of doing things. You should try it. I think it's important to, if you can, impart that to people. But it is strange. Yeah, music. It's like everywhere all the time, which makes it sort of not mean anything to a lot of people. It's like another background, ambient noise. I mean, like this idea of all of these playlists, like, music for sleep, music for study. Okay, that's cool. But like somebody wrote a symphony. What they didn't have in mind is like it being in the background, while you're studying for your math test. Like, that's cool. I don't have anything wrong with it, but it's a weird context to find that like hundreds of years later, some piece of music has been sort of delineated to like a Spotify playlist, and who knows? It's just, the whole thing's very odd.
Well, I can say, if I can put on my prognostication cap a little bit there, Jordan, in answer to your question, what are we going to find distinctive about this year in particular when we look back? Probably the fall of civilization, I got to think. Probably going to be it. But Randy, you did a brilliant job of also, I think, setting up our little digression that we had talked about in advance of this by mentioning that morphing of Rush during the mid-'80s. And I think it's fun to pose this kind of question to you in particular, as both a producer and a guitar player. Curious your thoughts about the use of one Alex Lifeson Lurkst during that period of time from Grace Under Pressure through Hold Your Fire. Some screamed, cried foul. You've buried Alex in the mix. You've taken the guitar away from Rush. Some have said he was used brilliantly in helping to form the sound of the band at that particular time. And there's a lot more subtlety and interesting stuff going on there. Alex apparently didn't protest as much at the time, or at least not loud enough for Getty to hear him. But in retrospect, they realize it. But I'm curious your thoughts. And Jordan's, really. I'm curious for both of you.
You go first.
No, I mean, like I was re-listening to Power Windows, and you definitely hear a decline of him, and I think he's a little more, I want to say that like in a negative sense, but a little more formulaic in terms of what he's serving with the song, like a lot of like guitar, chord strikes, decent solos, like the last song, the Mystic Rhythms, a lot of good clean arpeggios on there. So I can definitely understand the critiques compared to especially like the 70s classic stuff.
Right.
But to me, it's the case of like not standing out, but still serving the music. Yeah. It's almost like a Ringo Starr thing, not to keep going back to the Beatles, but it's like he's doing what he needs to do. He's not as much in the forefront, but I don't know. I think he's more so like texturing the atmosphere, the soundscape, and standing out when he needs to.
Yeah.
But I think it just fits. I mean, I think it always fits what they're doing, no matter what people think of what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah. That's it. Whether the conversation about the preference of that era is almost that's obviously a part of it. But, as a guitar player, I look at what he did and I find it to be very inspiring because it's a different way of using his voice and his instrument to express himself ultimately, but to be a part of a new musical landscape, which is to say that, okay, we're not 2112 Rush anymore, where I'm playing Les Paul and this is the sound. It's like we're doing this whole new thing now. It's like almost 10 years later. What is my place in this? And those sounds were not what was happening. So, it's a combination, I think, of looking around at what is happening in production and music and saying like, okay, we can be inspired by this, because those guys were always listening to what was hip and what was happening. That's part of their own progression, is that they didn't just land at Power Windows magically. It's like, no, you've got all of the Trevor Horn productions are happening. Like, it's very clear that they're listening to a lot of things that are going on, and they're kind of picking and choosing and saying like, we really like what's going on over here. Let's try to, let's do our version of this. What does it sound like if Rush takes on this kind of thing? It always sounds like Rush, but clearly informed by other things, so they're not just informed by Zeppelin anymore. Now it's probably they heard Frankie Goes to Hollywood and they're like, this production is amazing. As a Rush fan, you can recoil at that and say like, oh my God, why? But that's just the reality of, to your point earlier, as artists about doing the same thing over and over again or trying new things. You can't say that they weren't constantly trying new things up, all through the 80s. It's like, how can we find some new ways of presenting our instruments? So I think what he was doing was brilliant. And I find it to be, I didn't live through it, is my point too. So like, I understand what the shock would be if you were an old school fan from the beginning and that's what they morphed into. And if that was not your scene, you were going to get off that ride at some point and say like, I've had enough of this. Yeah. But if you stuck it out and you grew with it and you kind of saw what was going on at a musical level, some of their best playing is on those records. It's applied in a different way. Yeah. And I think it just comes down to personal taste, so you might just prefer the 1978 Alex, and it would be totally justified to say why that is. But but I think there's a lot happening under the radar on those records that your ear just maybe isn't scanning for it in the same way as like obvious rock guitar, because maybe the guitar is cleaner, or he's not playing like a sort of classic solo. It's more textured or more affected or that kind of thing, you know? Yeah. I mean, I have to say that it's really a highlight that I got to spend some time with him last year. As he came out to see one of the Steven Wilson shows in Toronto. And we also had dinner 2 nights before the show. So I got to hang with him twice. And, you know, he's exactly the guy that you think he is, which was awesome. It was just super cool to hang with him. And I didn't nerd out too much, but like, you know, I wanted to make it obvious that obviously from guitar player to guitar player, really, because what was crazy about it was that he watched the entire show from about 10 feet to my left. He wasn't out in the audience. He watched it from backstage. Oh, wow. We got him an in-ear monitor system. So essentially he was front row to me the entire show, which was crazy to just be playing and to just kind of look over and you know, wave, you know. It was very cool, but like I kind of touched on some of these things with him afterwards. You know, I was saying like specifically something in his playing seemed to really change around like Farewell to Kings. Like the leap that he made from the early records to like a Farewell to Kings Hemispheres, to me, that's where he really became Alex Lifeson. Like all of the things that we think of in his sound and his approach, it just seemed to like come online there. Great before, but like, but not exactly unique yet. And then right there, that's the sound, the chords, everything. But I also did bring up the 80s stuff and say like, I've found that to be massively influential to me, because it did show me that there are other ways to think about the guitar, you know, to where it isn't just the usual thing. I think another guy that was really brilliant at this, I don't know if you're a fan, is Bill Nelson. He had a band in the 70s called Bebop Deluxe, and they were like a really great sort of art rock band. And then he became a solo artist. And a lot of the fans of that band, they thought like that he had put down the guitar. And it's like, no, there's just as much guitar as ever, but it's, you're hearing it in this context that you're not hearing it the same way. So that's my way of saying like, I would go back to those records and actually specifically just try to listen to what he's doing. And there's a lot more there than you probably think, you know, and there's some great solos too. I mean, there's still some great solos, but, but it's just not the, you know, he evolved into some other space there, and they all did.
Speaking as the representative here who did live through it and that evolution, let me put my old man voice on. I mean, what I was hearing at the time, but Grace Under Pressure to me, I came on board with Rush between Signals and Grace Under Pressure. So Signals was the most recent album. To me, I wasn't yet familiar with a lot of the really older stuff, and I knew what I knew. So Grace Under Pressure wasn't as much of a leap for me. Right. In terms of style, in terms of mental readiness for it, it was definitely an evolution that fit with the times. And I always felt that album was interesting. Is like, it's funny because I know they were angry at the time that they were making that. And I think it came through a little bit in the way there was an edge to the music. And, you know, even if maybe they weren't as thrilled with Peter Henderson as maybe they might have been, I think the way it came out, there was a certain grit to the keyboards. There was a grit to the guitar. They blended together very nicely with this kind of mechanical power. That was really aggressive for both ends of it in most songs. You know, like Kid Gloves, you know, got a little bit lighter and all that, but for a lot of it, there was just this aggression and a darkness that I really enjoyed. And I never felt like the guitar disappeared in the middle of that. I just felt like the two things kind of wove together and made their own little tapestry. And yet it was still like this hard edge. Power Windows was the one where, yeah, even when I listen to that now, very much I felt like that was the Geddy and Neil show. And between the keyboards, but the bass, that, oh my Lord, some of that was, I think, in a collective album, some of Geddy's, to me, some of my favorite playing by him. The bass lines he was running.
Sorry to cut you off. I think arguably it might be his best vocal album.
It's a great vocal album on his part as well. Like he was nailing all cylinders in that album.
Yeah, the melodies that he's reaching for. I think the thing is, it's clear that the keyboards unlocked a new melodic capability for the band. You know, I know this too for myself. Like I'm not. Well, you can see that I'm surrounded by keyboards here. I love keyboards. I'm not a great keyboard player. I have taste and I have ideas, but I didn't grow up like taking piano lessons. So I soldier my way through it. But what I love about sitting down at a piano as opposed to guitar is I find voicings that I just am not going to naturally find on guitar. It's the way things are laid out. It's the clusters. It's the octaves that are available to you. Any song that I've written on keyboards has a completely different melodic sort of structure to it, or the melodies that I'm reaching for. It takes me to a different place, and I think it did that for Geddy, and I think that's why he was so enamored with it. You know, now other bands, they what they could have done in retrospect or as an alternate, he could have written those things and then stripped it away.
Yeah.
And then still had the melody intact. But obviously that became a core part of the sound.
Sure. Yeah.
Alex told me that the early days, they wrote a lot of those songs on acoustic guitars, like in the back seat, like on the way to a gig.
Right.
And that's not really what you think of when you think of Rush as like this power trio.
Yeah.
Like two guys sitting down with acoustic guitars, but then you actually listen back to like Fly By Night and that stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, not the jam sections, but a lot of the stuff, the chordal things, and there are a lot of acoustic guitars. So it was just, I think, a different way of writing. But sorry, I sort of hijacked your thing there.
But as I was saying, that's like, there were some amazing solos by Alex on that part, but he did, I think, very much took a bit of a back seat. Like I was always following the bass line and the drum lines. I am a drummer. I use the air quotes because I played a bit of drums when I was young, and I was never anything better than the low end of mediocre. But still, I have that inclination that I listen to the drums a lot and all those things, and am fascinated by it. And of course, Neil, was the god at whose altar I worshipped and such. Right. But when they got to Hold Your Fire, now still Peter Henderson, as memory serves, but I feel like they found their balance again a little bit. And it was a different tone than Grace Under Pressure. But still I felt like the keyboards and the guitars balanced a little bit nicer. But also I think the typical more prominent guitar tones were different vastly than you would hear in the 70s and even the early 80s. And there was much more of a, I don't even have the way to say it, but they were a little more, I guess, a little more treble, a little less bass is probably one way to say it, that there was not quite some bottom. Like,
it has a certain, like a sheen to it,
it's a good word.
And really the next few albums are like that. I've, as big a fan as I am, I've, Presto, Roll the Bones, those records, they're not ones that I go back to often. There's something about the production. It's pristine, but it feels like something's missing for me. But then you get to Counterparts and it's kind of back.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of roaring again. And there's some ridiculous guitar solos on that album.
Cut to the Chase, one of my favorite songs right there.
Yeah, crazy. Like
that's
it's like
amazing.
Oh, wow. He's been practicing something there, and I mean like you can just hear when musicians are clearly inspired by a moment or like what's going on, and that record has those moments where you're like, oh, okay, they're kind of like reclaiming something here. But it's having gone through all that stuff that gets you there.
Yeah.
So
and it's, see that happen like.
No, I was going to say it's interesting that period of time because I remember reading stuff and people how they perceived what Alex was doing, and they talked about textures and they talked about him being played and used like a keyboardist in many ways. He was fills and some backgrounds and things like that. And I even remember, and I had to look it up, there was a July 1987 issue of Guitar Player Magazine that had in it a little floppy record, a little insert. And it was a song called, the group was called Canadian Guitar Summit. It was Rick Emmett of Triumph, Ed Bickert, who was a big Canadian jazz musician, a jazz guitarist, Leona Boyd, who I think, or was she the jazz player? Maybe he was, one of them was more country or bluegrass, and the other one was jazz. I think Bickert was the jazz guy. And Alex. So like kind of four of the top, if not the four top Canadian players in there, and they kind of each had their own sections. Alex gets to his section, and it's not fiery solo Alex you would hear from like Free Will or something like that. It is a lot of mood. It's a lot of sustained notes and things like that, and him kind of playing into that whole thing. And I don't know to what degree the song was written or versus like we just have sections and you guys do your thing and the rest of us will support you or whatever.
Right.
But I always felt like he got a little short shrift on that in the sense that everybody else got to really show off their chops, shredding a bit. And Alex is back here doing this thing, maybe because that's what it was expected of him at the moment. And I don't know. Then again, you compare what he's doing with Envy of None at this point in time. And part of me says 80s Alex is not gone.
Yeah, he strikes me as a guy who presents himself the way he wants to.
Yeah.
I know, speaking for myself, like there have been many times where I've been in like jam situations where there's like a bunch of guitar players on stage, or even just one or two, and my impulse is not. I'm not getting into that sort of pissing contest of I'm going to try to out-shred the guy or on stage or whatever. Like I'm looking at it from a musical context. So if the person who's playing a solo right now happens to actually be doing that kind of thing, my instinct is to go in the opposite direction. Not only because I'm not looking to compete, but also because I think musically it would be far less interesting to add to more of that kind of thing.
Right.
Because then what are we listening to here? It's just a bunch of people going back and forth playing as many notes as possible. I haven't heard this piece you're talking about, but my instinct probably says that it's a combination of just where he was at creatively at the moment, but also maybe having heard what the other solos were, maybe he was like, I'm gonna go over here.
Yeah.
And not do that thing, that everybody else is doing or that's expected of me. And, that's a choice. Somebody asked me to be a part of a guitar compilation thing once, and I sent in a solo that was basically really slow and melodic. It was much more like a kind of Santana, Gary Moore kind of thing, just really long sustained notes. And I sent it in and they were like, oh, this is great. It's really beautiful. But it had this caveat, which is like, are you sure you don't want to shred more? Because, everybody's going to be shredding a lot in this video. And I'm like, I'm good. I don't care. Don't care at all. But that's the kind of, there is this kind of ego / self-conscious thing that can creep in when you're thinking in those terms. Like, I gotta really show those scales I've been working on, or like this person's going to be on it and they play so much faster than me. So, all of that kind of thing, or those types of things can kind of enter in, and I don't like playing into that. I think because usually it ends up not being musically satisfying because you kind of know that that's not really what your heart is in. You're kind of just doing it because you think you have to. And I've had to confront those types of things as musicians, in my life as well, especially
Right.
when you are a touring musician or somebody who's replacing musicians who have been in that role prior, who might have done more of that kind of thing. You have to say, like, okay, well, how much am I going to be me? How much am I going to try to channel this other person? What does the audience expect? There are a lot of different factors that can go into it. At the end of the day, also, it's the artist you're working for. They get the final say on what they want, So if it's like, I really need you to be like this, okay, or don't be like that at all. You're here to be you. That's the best thing you can hear, because then it's like, yeah, you just do what you want to do. And I think Alex is I'm going to do what I want to do kind of guy. I think when he was younger, I think, yeah, you're in your early 20s. That's sort of part of coming up as a musician and the sort of more macho attitude. I gotta play, man. I gotta play as many notes as possible, and whatever the case may be. A lot of people feel that urge earlier on, and that kind of tends to dissipate as time goes on. Or you make that your thing, and that's your calling card.
Yeah.
So I don't think he was one of those guys.
Certainly not in a long time.
Yeah. But I'm excited to see what they do this year.
Yeah. Didn't expect to have that opportunity again.
Yeah. I'm sure you're
see that coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tickets are somewhat understandably expensive, I would say. It's like, this is a big thing, but do you need to charge this much? Not to say it's their fault necessarily.
Yeah, that's also a part of the era we're in too.
Yeah.
Seems like,
and kind of takes it back to the beginning of yes, self-production and costs and what is available and how does any of this stuff work anymore. I think a lot of people are just constantly trying to figure it out. It is not, I can tell you this, it is not the industry that those guys came up in. It just isn't.
Not at all.
It's not the industry that they left when they played their last show. If you think about it, when was that?
2015.
2015.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine how much social media still wasn't actually much of an influence in our lives. It, at that point, had become pretty prominent, but nowhere near, us being 10, 11 years on from it now. It's completely different, and the whole way you put yourself out there. So yeah, it's weird to be in the game that long, to have to see it go through so many iterations, and then when you're out of it for a little while and you come back into it, I could imagine being those guys saying, like, what are we're doing a video for TikTok? What? So
I was surprised at how positive, at least from what I've seen, how positive the reception was to the news of them, like, not only coming back, but having obviously a different drummer.
Yeah.
I expected a lot more pushback of, like, nobody can be Neil, and which, I mean, no, but, like, would you rather have this? Would you rather have nothing? Like, I was kind of proud of people for not gatekeeping and not playing into, like, the nostalgia of kind of saying, look, I'm glad that they're getting back out there. Let's see what she can do. Let's see what they can do as a kind of a new trio. I was proud of people.
yeah.
Yeah. But there were plenty of the gatekeepers out there,
Oh, sure.
unfortunately.
Always are. Especially with Prog.
She's a girl. Get her, guys. Good God. Jeez, that girl, play your ass off.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah.
Should be enjoyable. All right, gentlemen. I think we may have chewed this topic to death.
Well, I hope I didn't hog. I mean, I know I was your guest, but I hope we got to all the things that you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out it's a pretty big topic.
Yeah.
Production and putting out music in this day and age, and it's changed a lot since I've been doing it, and I'm not incredibly young anymore. I still don't feel super old either, but I've been doing it long enough to recognize how many different things I've moved through just in my own time of doing this. So it's interesting to try to retrace some of those steps.
Yeah. No, you were great. I loved your insights. You're right here in this group, we're mostly, if we're the Prog Council, we're more the fans and the observers and the knowledgeable students of it all. You are the person who's done it. So that's the best part about having you here, because you know the stuff we don't know, and I love hearing. And that's the thing I've always enjoyed about this kind of stuff, is talking with people about how they create all this stuff, because I love music and I love the process and all the aspects of it. I grew up a liner notes reader, so
yeah,
that's how you learn names like Pino Palladino, one of the greatest musician names ever.
Yeah, and one of the great musicians ever. So yeah,
it was him and Tony Levin, pardon me. Like those were the two guys you saw back and forth. If there was a session bassist in there, it was one of those guys.
Right.
So at least that's what I remember. But you don't forget anything like Pino Palladino.
Yeah.
So anyway, Randy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad to have you here. You are, of course, welcome back anytime. You ever have a topic you want to throw at us and come on board, the email is open. Throw it our way. We'll throw you in here and talk about something until the wee hours.
You bet. Yeah, it'll be fun.
Great. Wonderful. Jordan, thank you for joining us as well. Of course, we'll probably see you back in the next episode when we get around to determining what that is. And we talked about the Canadian Guitar Summit for those of the curious, including Randy. I will find the video for that song. I'm certain it is sitting out there on YouTube somewhere, and I will put a link to that in the description for this video, so you can find it easily and enjoy that little piece of music. I always did enjoy it. It's a cool little instrumental. So we'll have that easily locatable for those of you out there. And in the meantime, that is all we have for you at this point. Join us next time when we have somebody we haven't lined up yet. We'll figure out who that is when the time comes. It's going to be a mystery until then. Thank you. All right. And that is episode 1 of the Prog Council completed. Both parts are out there. What do you think, folks? Drop us some comments. Let us know what you think about what we did, what we didn't do. Let us know what you think of the entire format. Hey, if you got suggestions for topics we can cover in the future, share those with us as well. We want to get your feedback. We want to hear what you think about this new feature. It's going to be a monthly thing, so we will see you again in a month with another guest artist. Of course, I want to send a big thank you to Randy McStine for joining us as our first guest on the inaugural edition and bringing all of his insights into production and music and the industry as a whole. Randy, it was great talking to you. I hope we can have you back again real soon. And of course, thank you to Jordan Blum for joining me and bringing all his knowledge. Of course, he writes for Prog Magazine, Loudwire, What Culture, Sonic Perspectives. The man is a busy dude. And I want to thank all of you for watching. If you got this far, thank you so much. Take a moment, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Throw us a like if you enjoyed the episode. And again, don't forget, share your comments. We'll be back again at the end of February with another guest and another topic. Until then, hang loose, never fear to deviate from the norm, and as always, keep it proggy.